Hey rice fans, welcome to another episode of Rice and Advice. I'm Dr. Jarrod Hardke, Rice Extension Agronomist for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today we're going to take a closer look at some rice growth stages and how we want to use those to determine our fungicide timings in rice. We're going to dig in a little bit and try to pick out some specific stems and plants to kind of guide us along the way of when we want to shoot for, again, generally when fields reach a stage when we might be prepared to make a fungicide application. Let's take a closer look. It's always fun to be able to go look at our planting date studies as a unique opportunity to see a lot of different rice at a lot of different growth stages. So certainly we have a lot of cultivars planted out here across 6 different planting dates actually. But again, we're going to take a closer look and pick out a few key timings. A lot of questions revolve around the proper time to make an application of tilt or similar fungicide to prevent smuts like kernel smut and false smut. And so actually one of the key things to point out of the gate on that is actually a plant such as this one that's at boot split. That boot is splitting open, you can start to see the kernels. Once we have plants that have reached that point in time where we're at boot split, we don't really expect to see any appreciable efficacy from a fungicide to prevent the smuts. It's too late by that point in time for the fungicide to get in the plant where it needs to be to prevent smuts. So we're looking to avoid letting it get that late when we're making an application when we hit boot split. We can all agree that there's no such thing as a perfectly uniform rice crop, so there can always be variability, but what we are shooting for on those smut application timings is here we can look at a plant. I can tell that the flag leaf is all the way out. You can see that flag leaf and collar. You can tell there's no additional leaf coming through that collar, so we know it's got to be the flag leaf. And further inspection, we can see more of the panicle starting to swell and move up the boot. So we're definitely in the window for a smut application timing, perhaps trending on the late side. We're probably only days away from reaching 50% heading and starting to split the boot. So we could still make a smut application timing here, but it is trending toward the late side. So moving on to even another planting date where we can actually see some slightly younger plants. Here we have a nice one where the flag leaf is still on its way out. We can pull it to the side. You can see that leaf is still pointed. So we know that it's on its way out, that flag leaf, but it's not all the way out. So this would definitely be what we would term as mid-boot, very near to late boot. You can see it's getting close to being completely out of there. But this is mid-boot, and this is actually an optimum timing for making a smut prevention application. Anytime between here and the very beginning of late boot, it's going to be an excellent time. Even if this leaf is only out a little ways, that really begins our window of when we want to make that smut application. Certainly there's still an opportunity to be too early with the smut prevention application. When you're really before the flag leaf has begun to come out at all, you still may be okay, but it's probably trending a little early. You're probably still at that point, potentially a couple of weeks from heading. And we're really shooting for a 10-day window that kind of starts when the flag leaf begins to come out from the previous leaf and really extends all the way to a few days into the late boot timing. So again, about a 10-day window, maybe as much as 14 depending on conditions. So a pretty good window, but the closer we get to actual boot split and heading, the more efficacy we're gonna lose and potentially have more smut and get less out of our fungicide. Now we can definitely think about things a little bit in reverse as it relates to making fungicide applications for blast prevention. So we're certainly making a lot of improvements between hybrids and then newer varieties in reducing our susceptibility to blast, but there's certainly still plenty of varieties out there that are potentially going to need to be managed to prevent blast. And so we want to kind of work back through similar timings that we went through discussing the smuts, but with the recommendations differing just a little bit as they relate to blast. So the timing that we mentioned before on smut, if we're looking to make our first blast prevention application, first fungicide application to prevent blast, this is too early. We are not into late boot yet. We do not want to make this application until that flag leaf collar is all the way out and we know we're fully into late boot at a bare minimum before we make that first application. Even if that flag leaf collar is just out, that's probably still, it's not ideal for blast prevention, a little too early, but if you're also trying to control smuts at the same time, that would be an optimum timing to try to do both. Again, giving a little bit up on both of them, but allowing you to target both with a single application. So still moving in that reverse order when we're looking at plants that are now, such as these, that do have the flag leaf all the way out. Again, no other leaf coming out. You can see that it's starting to swell. We're into late boot, nearing full boot with it ready to come out. This would be a great time to potentially make that first fungicide application for blast prevention if that's what we're targeting. Probably the truly ideal first application timing for blast, if we're doing a two-shot approach, is to be in this neighborhood where you've got the first plants starting to split the boot, pop out on a small amount. Some of those are at late boot, just about to head and splitting the boots. This would be a great time for that first application to go out in a two-shot approach. And then for the second application, if we can time it and get it spread out, panicles like this that are 50 to 70% out, but you notice that the collar, the neck, is still down in the boot, so it's still protected. That's a great time for that next application to go out. Again, if we're doing a two-shot approach, and those applications are going to be spaced something like 5 to 7 days apart between those two different timings. If you are to choose to go with a single fungicide application approach for blast prevention, then what you're targeting is, again, somewhere between the two application approach. So 30, say, just call it 50% of that panicle out. You know, here's a third of it out. This one, next one down, you know, maybe closer to 50 in this range. This is probably a really good timing to go with a single fungicide application approach for blast prevention. Again, taking a lot of factors into consideration when you make that decision. And here's a good example of when we're finally starting to waste our time making a blast application. Once this neck and the base is all the way out of the plant, out of the boot, there's nothing we can do. This plant is either going to have neck blast and panicle blast, or it's not, and is not going to be changed at all by whether or not we make a fungicide application at this time. Again, got several of them right here that are already beyond that point. There are a lot of factors to consider when making the decision about a fungicide application. If we're targeting smuts, we're worried about the susceptibility of the cultivar, what our nitrogen rates were, planting date, all of those things we worry about, and certainly field history is huge. We need to have a field history of the problem first to really justify the application. But if we're going to make that application, we're checking through those boxes and we see that we have some significant risk of smut problems, getting it properly timed to be in that mid-boot, flag leaf on its way out, to the beginning of late boot once you can see the flag leaf collar on the plant, but still days well ahead of boot split. That's going to be our optimum window to make the smut fungicides work for us. In the case of blast, obviously once again worried about susceptibility and conditions, water management, what we can do, certainly you know, how much blast is being found around in the area. But as a constant reminder, just because you haven't found leaf blast doesn't mean you can't get neck and panicle blast. And just because you find leaf blast doesn't guarantee that you'll get neck and panicle blast. So again, we're working with biological organisms here, and they don't always play by the rules we think that they should. But in the case of the fungicide applications for blast, for very susceptible cultivars, planted in tough conditions, difficult water management, we prefer a two fungicide application approach, quadris or quadris equivalent. And if you feel you're in better shape or have less risk and choose to go with the one application approach, then you can do that. But again, you're kind of splitting the difference between the two timings. Thanks for joining us once again. Hope you've learned a little bit at least about rice growth stages and fungicide timings based on University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture recommendations for controlling diseases in rice. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Dr. Yeshi Wamishi, your local county agent. We're all here to help. Phone, text, email, you name it. We'll be there and do what we can to answer any of your questions. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of Rice and Advice. Have a rice day.